Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? I said, how are you doing? All right, there we go, a little better. My name is Jordan McDowell. I'm a Vertex patient educator, and I'm really excited to be here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk to you about Vertex and who we are as a company. I'm also going to talk about our patient education team and then also how we can support you. The one thing that is a slight change is I will not be discussing gene therapy today. What's going to happen is tomorrow during a lunch and learn at 12:15, we'll be discussing the full overview of gene therapy for Vertex. So I won't be talking about that, but I will be talking about our amazing team and what I do in the field, especially in the West Coast. So let's go ahead and get started. So there's me, you know that picture with my old transitional lenses glasses. My name is Jordan, as I said. I'm from the West Coast. I'm here in the Bay. I live in San Francisco, California. That's right, Bay Area in the house. I love to hear it. The one cool thing I'm really excited about is that I get to be in front of this amazing community. So the why I do this is because I'm also a sickle cell warrior, so are my siblings, and so are my nieces and my family. So I'm very fortunate to be in a space, especially at Vertex, where I'm able to give education to a community that means so much to us. So the one thing that I also will say is I'm also continuing my education right now. I'm finishing my PhD. I'm working on population health and blood disorders and sickle cell disease. So yes, so I do it in school, I live it, but also I get to work for a proud company at Vertex where we get to give education to warriors, loved ones, and also caregivers. So excited to tell you what we do here at Vertex as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, first, I just want to let you know what Vertex is. So we are a global biotechnology company, and what we do is invest in innovative technology that's going to give this real big transformative medicines for people with serious diseases. And that includes sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. So let's just talk about what that means with our uncompromising commitment to patients. Well, first, we just want to talk about how we put patients first. Patients are at the center of what we do at Vertex, as they should be at everything that we do in life. Next, we always communicate clearly with our population, our community-based organizations, and that means being honest. It also means being transparent in what is happening. Any updates that we have at Vertex, we're going to make sure that you all as a community know what that is. Next is that we're going to listen and learn, right? We're going to make sure that we're listening and understanding what the community needs and make sure that we're also actively participating in the community as well. After that, we're going to make sure that we're respecting individual voices. This community is really unique because everyone is different and everyone has a really important perspective in life and also surrounding themselves with sickle cell as a caregiver or maybe as someone who's a loved one as well. So doing that, make sure that we are supporting initiatives like being here today, being involved in the community, making sure we're here to give out education, but also at other events. Those other events could be walks, they could be other conferences, or they could just be having meetings with you all in the community, which is really important. And then lastly, just engaging and providing those opportunities to do things. One of my favorite things to do in the community is I get to host what are called PE-hosted events. So I get to go into the community, have a lovely meal with some patients, caregivers, loved ones, and also educate on different aspects of what we involve. That might include gene therapy, that might include just sickle cell disease or thalassemia, or it could also be educating on what our Vertex product is as well. So a plethora of things that we can do, so I'm really excited that we're able to do that here at Vertex. So what is a patient educator? Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. I am in charge and my team, and we're located throughout the US. I'm located in San Francisco. My colleague Taylor, who will be here, is in Houston. And my director over there in the corner, he's in Atlanta. So what we do is we educate to empower this community to have really important conversations with their healthcare providers. It is the one focus that we want to do. You should feel empowered to have those important questions asked and answered from healthcare providers. Now, the three main things I want to talk about before I leave you is what we're trying to do as patient educators. So we're trying to educate, of course, we're trying to connect with the community, but also we want to empower you. So education comes in what I was talking about, right? Educating on the disease state, that's sickle cell and that's thalassemia. But also it's educating on what is gene therapy, what are the different types of gene therapy, so that you're educated and know what that is. Next, that's going to be talking about what our Vertex product is in gene therapy and the treatment journey in that. After we're doing that, we want to make sure that we're connecting with you, listening, actively learning, and making sure that we're involved in that community with you. And then after we do that, we hope that you feel empowered to have those conversations with healthcare providers. We know it can be difficult to start those conversations, ask those questions, but it's really important that you feel empowered. So we have booklets that have starter questions and things like that for you to do and to utilize as resources. And we're really excited that we're able to provide some of that for you all. Now, the one thing that I do not do and our team does not do is we do not give medical advice. We always want you to feel like you should go to a healthcare provider to get any questions and answered based on what you need. So if you have questions about your disease, questions about therapies, I'm always going to say make sure you're having those conversations with a healthcare provider that you trust. Now, I do have educational events that are located throughout the US. So this QR code will take you to our website, and there's going to be events that are either virtually or in person, and we add events periodically. So this is a great QR code to go to our website and get involved. Also, there's a way for you to sign up to get added to our list, and that'll just make sure that you know what's coming up in the areas as well. And if you don't have time to take a picture of this QR code, of course, I'll be out there at the table with my colleague Taylor or my director Travis, and we'll be able to make sure you're connected with this website as well. And before I go, the last thing I just want to do is this is a really cool survey. So this goes back to Vertex. So if you have questions or concerns or things that you would like to learn about Vertex, this is a great way to give some feedback. Also, it gives feedback on how I did as a presenter today. So if you want to write a little, Jordan's the best presenter ever, that will go a long way for me. But I do want to just say thank you so much for having Vertex here. And as I said, I won't be talking about gene therapy right now, but tomorrow, come to our booth and we'll make sure that you get the information that you need. So thank you again for having Vertex come here today. We're so proud to be here and engage with you all. And you all continue to have a great, afternoon or evening? Afternoon, there we go. All right, bye you all.
And that lunch and learn.
I think it's out of battery.
The lunch and learn is at 12:15 tomorrow, so please come and hear more about Vertex. And our next presenter, Sherry, is from Bluebird Bio, and will be sharing more information about gene therapy.
Good afternoon. I'm going to make sure that we can be heard here, and so the slides are up. Okay, so first and foremost, thank you. My name is Sherry Reed. I'm with Bluebird Bio, and today I will be talking about our gene therapy, which is Lyfgenia, for sickle cell disease. A few disclaimers, and first and foremost, I want to thank Cayenne Wellness for having us here today to be a part of this. I am an employee of Bluebird Bio. I do want to let you know that our presentation today is really intended for U.S. audiences, and it's not intended to take the place of any discussions with your healthcare providers or to provide any medical advice. And as always, we don't make any treatment recommendations either. So please discuss these questions or treatment with your physician as well. We've kind of gone over my bio, but since we're doing this whole East Coast, West Coast thing here today, I'm from the East Coast, right? Philadelphia, right? I see the green there, right? I didn't dare wear green out here today. But thank you for that, Philadelphia Eagles, right? That's it. All right, thank you. There's a slogan, Go Birds, exactly. So I'm part of the patient and community education team here at Bluebird Bio. A little bit about Bluebird Bio. First and foremost, how many of you have even heard of Bluebird Bio? Anyone? Okay, great. I see some hands up, and that's fantastic. We're a biotech company, and all we do is gene therapy. We focus on gene therapy for patients who are living with severe genetic disorders. In fact, we're leaders in gene therapy. We have over 10 years in the gene therapy space. Again, dedicated to severe genetic disorders, and that's led to us having 3 FDA-approved gene therapies, including one of them for sickle cell disease. We do have robust clinical experience, over 180 plus patients that have been treated with our therapies across the board in clinical trial, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the sickle cell community for their participation in helping to bring these therapies forward. The last thing I want to tell you about Bluebird Bio is our commitment to patients. So that happens in 2 ways. We have a team of patient navigators called My Bluebird Support. That's a program to help you or any patient or caregiver who is going through or considering the treatment journey and try and figure out, is this therapy for us? For them. So I'll be talking a little more about them later on. But lastly and most important, I think it's important that we have a huge focus on access and reimbursement. In the space of gene therapy, we know how this is evolving. This is an evolving therapy, and it's relatively new in terms of the landscape of how we navigate access and reimbursement. And our team has really been involved in trying to develop timely and equitable access for patients in that space. So what we're going to cover is I'm going to give you a quick overview of gene therapy, what is Lyfgenia and who's it for, how Lyfgenia actually treats sickle cell disease at the genetic level. We'll go over some important safety information, the clinical trials for Lyfgenia. We want to know how this thing works, right? And what the treatment process looks like. I know a lot of patients are concerned about that. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with some additional resources and questions to support your conversations with your healthcare providers about the therapy. So first and foremost, when we think about what is gene therapy, really in a nutshell, gene therapy treats diseases at the genetic level, right? So gene therapy has been really used or studied for multiple of different types of diseases. And as of March of this year, there's 15 FDA-approved gene therapies across many rare diseases, and we are fortunate to have 2 in sickle cell. But taking a look at how gene therapy works, so as I mentioned, there's 2 FDA approved for sickle cell disease. There's gene addition and gene editing. Now, both types of these therapies actually use your own cells, which means you get to be your own donor. You don't need a donor. But there are different approaches, and let's take a look at how the approaches are different. So in gene therapy, it's designed to treat sickle cell disease by adding genetic material. It essentially adds a working copy of a beta globin gene to help your body produce a working form of adult hemoglobin. In gene editing, it's designed to treat sickle cell disease simply by inactivating or silencing some of the genetic material. In particular, it inactivates the gene that's responsible for hemoglobin switching that essentially allows you to produce fetal hemoglobin. So if you were wondering, what is Lyfgenia? Lyfgenia is actually gene addition therapy.
Work covers benign.
Okay. All right, we're all right. So Lyfgenia is gene addition therapy, and that's what we'll be speaking about for the rest of the time. So I do have to say this, that Lyfgenia is a one-time gene therapy treatment that treats sickle cell disease at the genetic level. I can't tell you how many patients have come up and said, well, do I get this every month or once a quarter? How does this work? It's one time. It's made specifically for you. You get to use your own cells, so there's no donor that's needed. It's currently indicated for patients who are 12 years of age or older with a history of vaso-occlusive events. Hold on to that term for a second. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And how it works is it essentially allows for the production of anti-sickling hemoglobin, which in turn, the benefit is it's going to decrease or stop your vaso-occlusive events. Now, that's a mouthful there, and my first question to you is, how many of you are familiar with the term VOE or vaso-occlusive events? A couple of you. Okay, great. Yeah, it kind of went right over your head, right? All right, that's fine. I'm glad you said that. So I want you to think about VOE as a sickle cell crisis. So when we talk about VOEs, that is a clinical term that we use in our clinical trial. And in a nutshell, it's really a sickle cell crisis. But how we define VOEs in our clinical trial was that if you had a visit to a medical facility with an acute episode of vaso-occlusion, and let's break that word down. It's a blockage in your vasculature that lasted greater than 2 hours. So some examples of that could be acute chest, a blockage in the liver, or a blockage in the spleen. That's how we define VOE. So as I said, every time moving forward, when you hear the term VOE, think of a sickle cell crisis, because that's exactly what we're talking about. I do have to go over some important safety information. The first thing I want to tell you is at the time of our initial FDA approval, we did have 3 patients who were diagnosed with blood cancer. Now, 2 of those patients were treated with an earlier version of Lyfgenia that did use a different manufacturing process as well as a transplant procedure, and 1 patient had alpha thalassemia trait. The rest of this information here is actually in our package insert. So later on, you're going to see a QR code that can take you to our website, lyfgenia.com, where you're able to actually see our package insert and review it. The other thing that I do want to point out is that you may experience some side effects from other medications, including chemotherapy, which is part of the administration of receiving Lyfgenia. And after receiving chemotherapy, it may not be possible for you to have a child, either father or become pregnant. So because of that, you do want to speak to your clinician about fertility preservation before treatment. So let's really talk about how Lyfgenia treats at the genetic level. And I think to do that, we have to kind of talk a little bit about what's happening in sickle cell. Now, I know we've had a lot of presenters today, which have kind of broken down lots of different things, but just in short, sickle cell disease is really caused by a mutation or a change in the beta globin gene. And that gene really doesn't allow patients with sickle cell to make adult hemoglobin. So for those of us who actually don't have sickle cell, we make hemoglobin A. Adult hemoglobin. Adult hemoglobin is the primary form of hemoglobin that our bodies make shortly after birth. So anywhere from 3 to 6 months after birth, technically nature turns off the switch that allows us to make fetal hemoglobin, and we start making adult hemoglobin, and that makes up about 90% of the hemoglobin in our body. For individuals with sickle cell disease, they have that mutated beta globin gene. That means they can't make adult hemoglobin. Instead, they make sickled hemoglobin. Now, we've heard a lot of presenters today talk about sickled hemoglobin and the problems with sickled hemoglobin. We know that sickled hemoglobin clumps together. It causes red blood cells to change shape, hence giving it that name of sickled. But when you think about gene therapy, or specifically Lyfgenia as gene addition, what is it doing? Well, again, we're adding a working copy of the beta globin gene that's now going to allow your own stem cells to create red blood cells that are going to contain adult hemoglobin. So remember, patients with sickle cell didn't make adult hemoglobin before or after this, they will. So taking a look at the treatment journey, you can see here that in short, the process is your blood stem cells are collected. After they're collected, they're sent to the lab and modified, where we create Lyfgenia. After that, you're brought back to the treatment center, where you're going to receive chemotherapy to prepare your body for Lyfgenia, to receive the infusion. At that point, you will receive the Lyfgenia infusion, and then your body ultimately will start creating red blood cells that will essentially be adult hemoglobin. Again, what's the benefit of that? It's going to potentially decrease or stop your experience, or you experiencing vaso-occlusive events or sickle cell crisis. I do want to take a moment and talk about step 2 there in collecting the cells and how they're modified. So one of the things that happens when we modify the cells, we use a viral vector. We use actually the most widely studied viral vector called the lentiviral vector. Now, the reason that we use viral vectors in order to modify your genes is because viruses are really efficient at delivering genetic material to the cells in your body. So while they're based on viruses, they certainly don't contain parts of the viruses that can cause an infection. And while the lentiviral vector is based on the blueprint of the HIV virus, I think the real key thing to take away here is that Lyfgenia can't cause HIV because remember the parts of the lentiviral vector blueprint that we're using have been removed that would cause any sort of infection. Let's take a look at the clinical trial of Lyfgenia, and that's going to really help you understand the study and the results. So Lyfgenia is the longest studied approved gene therapy for sickle cell disease. We initially had 54 patients who initiated stem cell collection, but in the end we had 45 patients who were actually treated with Lyfgenia. The youngest was 12 and the oldest was 43, with the median age being about 25. And we followed those patients for a median duration of 42 months. Now, in the study, our study consisted of study 1. And what you're going to see in this next slide is that study 1 of Lyfgenia actually evolved over time due to improvements in the cell collection, transplant, and the manufacturing process. So taking a look at our actual study, you can see here there's 3 sections to the study, A, B, and C. And all 3 sections, if you add them together, include all 45 patients. And you can see between study A and B, there was a protocol change, and between 1B and 1C, there was another protocol change. These were the changes that included improvements to cell collection, transplant, and manufacturing process. Now, when we talk about the safety of Lyfgenia, really trying to figure out, is this therapy safe for patients? That data came from all 3 arms of the study, A, B, and C, as well as our ongoing long-term follow-up study. When we talk about, is this therapy effective? Did it work? That was based on study 1C arm, where you see we had 36 patients who were treated. The real takeaway here is that the FDA-approved version of Lyfgenia uses the same cell collection and manufacturing process that you see in study 1C. I also mentioned earlier that we talked about blood cancer, and we would talk about it further on in the presentation. So in regard to the individuals who did develop blood cancer as a result of receiving Lyfgenia, here's what I can tell you. 2 of those individuals, they were in study arm 1A. They were treated with an earlier version of Lyfgenia. Again, remember that used a different manufacturing process, a different transplant process. They developed acute myeloid leukemia. And unfortunately, these individuals did pass away during the clinical trial. The 3rd patient that developed blood cancer was in the arm of 1C. Now, this patient developed what's known as MDS, or myelodysplastic syndrome. And this individual actually had what's called alpha thalassemia trait. And as it says there, it's a condition that affects the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. Now, because of that, there's limitations of use for patients who have alpha thalassemia trait. Actually, if you have 2 or more alpha thalassemia traits, deletions, then it's a limitation of use. And I'll try and wrap this up here, but a couple things to take away. We know that individuals living with sickle cell have an increased risk of blood cancer compared to those who don't. And also, we know that additional stress and conditioning of Lyfgenia or anytime you're going through any of those additional mobilizations can in turn increase your risk of blood cancer. So because of this, it's important to be monitored at least every 6 months for a minimum of 15 years. Lastly, I do just want to share with you the efficacy results. There were 36 individuals, 32 of them actually fit the criteria of having at least 4 VOEs or sickle cell crisis. And what we saw after after 6 to 18 months post-Lyfgenia, 88% of them didn't have any VOEs, and 94% didn't have severe VOEs. Severe VOEs was essentially defined as, having multiple visits to an urgent care over 72 hours, or receiving IV medication, or any episode of priapism. A couple key things I do want to note is that we did have 5 patients in our trial that had a history of stroke. All 5 of these patients were 18 years of age or older, and they were on chronic transfusion therapy prior to Lyfgenia. And then at 44 to 60 months follow-up, all 5 of these individuals remained transfusion and stroke-free. This is a picture which really shows, the clinical trial, and I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you look on the left, you're looking at, in the rows, all 32 patients. Each row represents a patient. Each circle represents a vaso-occlusive event. We're looking at patients over 24 months prior to receiving Lyfgenia. You can see many of these patients did have a VOE, or sickle cell crisis, pretty frequently, almost every month prior to receiving Lyfgenia. The green line denotes when they received Lyfgenia, and everything to the right is looking at them 6 to 18 months after receiving Lyfgenia. Yeah, I love that response there, because one of the things I like to ask patients when I show this is like, what would that response or that picture on the right mean for your experience with sickle cell? So a couple notes I do want to share is that we didn't have any clinically meaningful differences in efficacy or safety with patients who were adolescents or adults in the clinical trial. Because we're out of time, I'm just going to run through this really quickly. There are 6 steps to the treatment journey. You definitely want to talk with your clinician ahead of time to figure out if this treatment is right for you. They're going to evaluate you and run tests. Once all that is determined, and it's determined that you are a candidate, you'll have your stem cells collected through mobilization and apheresis. We talked earlier, another presenter, about the apheresis machine and that process, and it's very similar to that. That could take up to a week. You'll be at the treatment center for that. You may need to go through multiple cycles in order to collect enough stem cells. Your cells do get sent out to the lab, and at that point, it's going to be about 10 to 15 weeks before your cells come back to you. Once they are brought back, you're going to be brought back into the treatment center, I'd say from step 4 on. Plan to be at the treatment center anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. And once you're brought in, you're going to be given chemotherapy, which is conditioning to help prepare your bone marrow to receive the treatment. And then after that, you're going to actually receive your Lyfgenia infusion. The infusion takes about a half hour per bag. There's anywhere from 1 to 4 bags. And then you'll be in the treatment center for recovery, and of course, long-term follow-up every 6 months for 15 years. I will say this entire process can take anywhere from 8 months to a year. It varies per patient, and I stress that because I've had patients say, is this something I can get done over Christmas break? No, not exactly. Lastly, things you should avoid: don't donate blood, cells, tissues, or organs. Side effects, of course, on the day of treatment is low blood pressure and hot flush. We've talked about blood cancers. We've talked about having consistent checkups with your provider, enrolling in our post-marketing study. We've also talked about HIV and due to the lentiviral vector and the fact that you cannot get HIV from this. I do want to stress that if you, after receiving Lyfgenia, need to receive an HIV test, you do want to let your clinician know that you've had gene therapy with Lyfgenia, and they will use a different type of test. They will not use a PCR-based test because that test could come up as a false positive. So there are different tests. Just talk to your provider about that if needed. So in conclusion, Lyfgenia is a one-time transformational gene therapy. It does have the potential to decrease or stop vaso-occlusive events or sickle cell crisis. It's designed to help your body start producing working adult hemoglobin. It is the longest approved study for gene therapy. It's currently approved for 12 and up with a history of vaso-occlusive events, and you don't need a donor. Lastly, a couple QR codes. Here's a QR code here for our support team, which is our patient navigation team, My Bluebird Support. This is the team you want to talk with if you walk away today and you're thinking, I wonder if this is for me. Where can I find a treatment center? Is there financial assistance? Are there resources for fertility preservation? This is a team that can answer all of those questions. That QR code will take you to them. Also, there's an 800 number there. You can contact them by that number or by email there. And then lastly and most importantly, we do have a website called liftginia.com. That QR code there in the bottom right will take you there. And there is a patient consideration brochure that you can receive or download at that website. That patient consideration brochure goes over everything I just reviewed, but in the back, there's 2 pages with questions to help set you up for success in having the conversation with your clinician. So be sure to download that. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll turn it over to our moderators for Q&A.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. We will go ahead and roll right into questions.
So the definite age frame that people are eligible for,
Age range, people are eligible for gene therapies. Is that what you're asking for? Okay, it starts at 12.
Starts at 12 and up. So for Lyfgenia, it currently is ages 12 and up.
is there an end to that?
Our label, there is no cutoff age in the label for Lyfgenia at this time. So I would just simply say 12 and up and make sure that you get evaluated by your healthcare professional.
Hi, it's Mark Walters again from UCSF. So the treatment centers, I think, should be adept at both supporting through the transplant portion of the treatment, collecting the cells needed for the gene therapy, and also supporting through a comprehensive sickle cell program.
Can you do us a favor and speak into the mic?
I thought I was.
Yeah, there
I'm
you go.
standing right here. Oh, okay. I'm worried about the number of treatment centers that are actually qualified both in sickle cell disease care and the transplant aspect of the care. And I'm worried because most of the people who have sickle cell disease in this country don't live near a treatment center or live in states where their state Medicaid insurance won't cover this as a benefit. And it's heartbreaking when we get referrals and authorization is denied. So this is a problem of access overall, access to getting approval of the payment, and then also access to a bona fide treatment center. I've heard aspirational numbers, 50, 75, 100 centers in the United States. That's not feasible. We don't have 100 centers in the United States that can deliver this excellent expert care. So that's a quandary for us in the future, and I'm just curious, how do you advise families and persons affected by sickle cell disease when they hit that wall, and there aren't easy answers to gain access?
Yeah. No, thank you so much for the question. You bring up some really good points in regards to access. One thing I can say about Bluebird is we currently have about 70 qualified treatment centers that are activated around the country for our therapies, and that will most likely be growing. We do recognize that there are some patients that may have some challenges or may not be readily close to a center. But I think that is something you definitely want to work with our patient navigation team in terms of helping with resources towards that. I know that's something our company has a focus on in terms of making sure that as this therapy continues to be available, that it is accessible for patients out there. The other point you brought up in regards to Medicaid and access, I guess, from a payer, thank you, a payer situation. I will say that Bluebird Bio has been actively engaged in working with Medicaid payers state to state as they are evolving and coming up with policies and payer policies in regards to gene therapy as a whole. And our team actually works very closely with centers and patients who are enrolled and helping to push and pull through their access through their payers, whether it be Medicaid, Medicare, or commercial patients, and even TRICARE. So it is definitely something that's evolving, and we are working on it, and we continue to work on it.
I just have a quick question. Adrian from Access Advocacy. So the problem that we keep running into is what happens with the timeline between collection and then actual infusion of product. And I just want to know if in your companies, are you working on or with the teams to ensure that maybe you can get a better collection so that we don't have that long? Because we've had people, they've had 2, 3, 4 collections.
Yeah.
And then that year goes on to maybe 18 months. I mean, it's really hard and not sustainable. So we can talk about that later, but that's just something that of all the people I've been following and working with, it's something, that I think we need to be paying attention to.
No, thank you for mentioning that. As I mentioned, collections could take more than one. On average, people have been collected in 1 to 2 cycles. There are some anomalies where it's taking longer, where people have been, I guess, slow mobilizer or poor mobilizers, and that is something we're definitely working on to improve as the therapy goes on. So stay tuned, there'll be more coming on that.
Mine's kind of a follow-up to the previous question. I know, obviously, one of the big barriers is that, $2-3 million price tag of these gene therapies. With Medicaid payers, has there been any consideration of any value-based contracting as a bit of a compromise to some of these public payers that are maybe a little unsure compared to a standard of care cost that's significantly lower?
I want to make sure I understood your question. Are you asking, are we lowering the price, or?
No, about value-based contracting methodologies to kind of make it a little easier of a pill to swallow for Medicaid and Medicare?
Yeah, I actually don't have a great answer for that question, to be honest with you. What I can tell you is that while patients often think, well, how could we afford $2 or $3 million? The space of gene therapy, whether it's sickle cell or any other disease, gene therapies are $3 million and up on average, right? Maybe in time the costs will come down, but I think at this point the real focus is getting payers to recognize the value of these therapies and provide coverage, and we are currently seeing that.
I'll go. I'm Tammy John. I'm a gene therapist at Stanford Children's, and I think to add a little bit to that, at a federal level, we are working in the United States to try to build out within certain states that agree Medicaid kind of agreements that might have this value-based payment. So just something to think about, continuing to advocate at the federal and at the state level, because each state's going to be different if they're going to agree to pay, if they're going to be able to pay. But the federal government has tried to start to set standards for sickle cell disease. My question for you is actually to tack on a little bit to what Dr. Walters asked, and is around fertility preservation. So can you explain a little bit about what Bluebird is trying to do to help support fertility preservation?
Yeah, for sure. So we currently, there's been something called the CMMI model, which allows industry partners to cover fertility preservation for states who have enrolled in that CMMI model in the Medicaid space. So, if you were to contact our My Bluebird support team, they could definitely go into great detail about that. But there are resources and support currently for fertility preservation for patients who are undergoing gene therapy.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on to the next session at this point. If there are any more questions for Bluebird, you'll be around. Yeah, you should be around to be able to answer those.